آله وصحبه من والاه أما بعد. Apologize for being late today. That was not my intention. I actually finished halaqah early just to get here on time. And then I had 3 things back there that made me late. Okay, so bismillah. First things first, just a reminder now, and I'm going to remind you guys at the end as well, that on Saturday is the youth qiyam here. And it's an opportunity in this Ramadan for the youth to gather in the masjid to be able to take advantage of the mahol and environment of the masjid. And at the same time to be able to take advantage of a bunch of activities that inshallah bring you closer to Allah. Obviously there's qiyamul layl in which you'll be praying. And on top of that, okay, Anas, you have to go over there, okay? And then on top of that you have other opportunities such as, table tennis. You might be saying, well, how is that a chance to get closer to Allah? Because we're commanding Allah in the Quran, ittaqullah, to have taqwa of Allah, and that's not easy. وَكُونُوا مَعَ الصَّادِقِينَ. And to do that, we have to be among people of piety. So I consider all of you to be people of piety. So being people of piety, and you hang around with one another, then you're naturally going to be inclined to grow closer to Allah Ta'ala. And then you have 2 speakers who are going to be coming, and they're going to be able to have an informal conversation regarding questions and other youth issues that might be on your mind. And it doesn't have to always be around sexuality and drugs and girls and dating, etc. It could be anything. It could just be about spirituality. It could be about crises at home. It could be a lot of things. It could be about, hey, I'm thinking about going to college. What should I do? But at least it gives you a chance to be around people. Khadija and Anas, we're not running. Khadija, Anas? If that's the case, I have to take you home, okay? Thank you. Good job, Hamna, sitting down. And then there's obviously suhoor, which is going to be the highlight. I'm joking. Prayer is obviously the highlight, but suhoor will be provided as well. And I don't know if there's snacks throughout the entire time, but you will, inshallah, be satiated and you'll be comfortable, inshallah. So that's number 1. Number 2. It is Ramadan, we're approaching the halfway mark, we're between the 1/3 and halfway mark, and having approached this time, we have to sort of take a step back and think, okay, how has the first 12, 13 days gone for us? And I'm not going to ask that question publicly, but I want you to ask yourselves this question, because if it has not gone the way you wanted, it's not too late to make the changes. This time in Ramadan is the most difficult time. This is the lull in Ramadan. That's where people stop coming to the masjid. That's where people, they're not as motivated to read as much Quran. Maybe you're staying away from like YouTube and things before. Now all of a sudden you see yourself on there a couple times, etc. We all have this lull that kicks in. This is the time to fight through. This is, like if you're working out, the beginning is easy because you just got to the gym and you're motivated. The end is easier because it's like, okay, it's the end. Let me crank out this last set and leave. The middle is where people sort of relax. Same thing with games. If someone's watching like a basketball game or a football game, they want to catch the last quarter, or they want to catch kickoff or tip-off at the very beginning. The middle, people are like, oh, whatever happens, happens. It doesn't really make a difference because in the end, it's just going to all come down to the last quarter. So the middle lull is always difficult for people to fight through. And one of the ways to fight through this is to establish a schedule. I have set up a schedule, a template for a schedule where it's half-hour increments. I've done it myself. I filled it out. I put it on my fridge, and I check it daily, just to see what my goals are and what I should be doing at a specific time. My halaqah, like the one I do online, they've done it as well. And if you guys are interested, just reach out to me, inshallah. You can email me at saad.qadri@gmail.com. You can just ask me, and, you can text me 224-628-0249, and with your email address, I can send it to you. But it's a good way to make sure that you're staying on track. So that's that. Third thing, quick review from last week. We covered a few major incidents last week. One incident was what? Anyone? Yes. Uzair, go ahead. Father was brutally murdered. On top of that, his father being brutally murdered, what did they claim that he did actually? Yes. Wait, who just answered? Hisham, go ahead. That he killed himself. Yeah, so they said, this guy, no, he didn't get murdered, he killed himself. Pretty much what? He took some huge stone and picked it up and cracked his head open and crushed in his skull and threw his body under a rail track or a rail car and severed it almost in half and then stayed alive in that time, which is ridiculous. He owned a gun. We know that there were times where people came from the KKK, etc., to his what's that thing called? His home. And he took out his rifle and he stepped outside. He could have killed himself in different ways. So that's one set of incidents. Who remembers what happens to his mom after that? Yes. What's your name? Faizan says, okay, cool. Yeah, and why did she go crazy? Who remembers? Yes, Hisham, go ahead.
Because a lot was happening in my life.
Yeah, a lot was happening. She tried to get with another person. He seemed like a good guy, but then eventually he left her as well. That is a flyer for the youth qiyam.
No.
Oh, that's the time. Can you step away from there, Anas? Go towards the back. Thank you. A lot was happening in her life, and you always assume like, oh man, I'll lean on my parents. He didn't have that option. Dad died, mom goes crazy. We left off with the huge. He goes into a foster home. He's well taken care of. He happens to have parents, foster parents, who really liked him a lot, and he was actually well loved. He was well received. He was eloquent, to what you would expect a seventh grader to be. He was well liked, he was jovial, he was good looking, he was popular. He was voted what? Who remembers? What was he voted? Yes. Hamza? Right? Class president. Yes, he was voted class president, which is a big thing. I put it inside? Okay. Anyone here ever class president? No one? I was school president in 8th grade, so pretty awesome. I'm joking. I was, but it's one of those things where you have to win a popularity contest, although I wasn't popular at all. I think people just felt bad for me. 'Cause I was the really overweight kid whose parents didn't dress him that nicely. They dressed me like any Desi parents would dress their kids, but that's not popular, right? And so I'm just joking around. But yeah, it's one of those things that he was voted class president, alhamdulillah. Now we get into this turning point. This is a pivotal moment in his life. Up till now, everything that's happened, he was able to bear it. Who's ever heard the statement, the straw that breaks the camel's back? What does that mean? Yes, go ahead. What's your name again? Jawad. Yeah. And you're always in the same area. I still can't remember. Go ahead. Yeah, the end point. So when you used to have, prior to cars, prior to trucks, when you want to transport something, you put it on load-bearing animals. So load-bearing animals, I'll give you an example for myself. Like sometimes I'll be working at home. I'll be doing push-ups. One of my kids will come and they'll lay on my back. I'm like, I could do it with one of them. A second one comes, I'll struggle. Third one comes, I collapse. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was a little too much. I couldn't keep myself anymore. You fall over. Camels used to put stuff on, all this weight. But eventually, at this one point, if you put even something as thin and almost weightless as a straw on it, if the load's too much, it'll break the camel's back. Malcolm dealt with a lot. He dealt with a lot, and still he was able to persevere and persevere and persevere. But there was one last incident, and it was just too much for him. And guess what? It broke him. Now I'm going to stop here. I'm going to share a personal story about me. And I'm going to be sharing a lot of things personally about me, not because hopefully I'm not narcissistic, but I think it's just good to share. Just so you guys, if you're feeling the same thing, it's important that you can learn a lesson from it. I started teaching when I was 20 years old, almost 21 years old. That's when I left, started teaching. I was initially a junior high teacher, and I became a high school teacher. And I started teaching, and then I taught for about a decade, and then I took a couple years off in between. And then I went overseas to study. When I came back, I became an imam. Being imam is tough. Hafiz Tahir did not pay me to say this. Mufti Hisham did not pay me to say this. I'm saying this on my own. It is tough. Because being imam, everyone's your boss. The random musalli will come and say, oh, Isha was too fast today. So then you slow it down. And then someone else comes, why are you leading Isha so slow? Then you speed it up. And someone else comes, your tajweed wasn't good today. Then someone else comes, why are you citing the same surahs over and over? It's always some critique. I don't know if that's the case here. I've never heard that over here. But in general, that's what I've experienced. And I had a very, very good congregation community. That stuff adds up. So after I left being imam, I was imam for a little more than 4 years. One of the things that began to become apparent was that my mental health took a big hit. I actually started going to depression, and I faced a lot of anxiety, and I had to see a therapist. Now, I was fortunate. One, my wife's a therapist, so she actually pulled me aside. She's like, I think you're depressed. I'm like, nah, I'm not depressed. She's like, no, I think you are. Then one of my teachers pulled me aside, and he mentioned, I think you're depressed. And I'm like, okay, 2 people are saying it. Maybe it's true. And so then I eventually found a therapist at Khalil Center, and alhamdulillah, I've been having therapy since. It's helped a lot. Why am I mentioning this? You guys didn't go through a lot of stuff in your life. The youngest of you to the eldest of you are going to go through a lot of things. Some things you'll be able to understand based upon what others go through, and some you won't. Sometimes you need someone to reach out to. and you need someone to talk to. If you want to reach out to me, I'm there. If you want to reach out to a friend, inshallah, they'll be there. But sometimes you have to go to people who are trained. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm telling you openly, there's nothing wrong with that. Why am I saying that? Because there's proof of that in hadith that nothing's wrong with that. I'm not going to do that over here because this talk is not about mental health. But Malcom didn't. Awesome, but can you go there? Because I'm speaking over here. Thank you. Go to the back by Hamna Khadija, okay? Because Malcom didn't have someone to go to. So he bottled it in. And he bottles it in for about 8 years. And it really ends up in him going to prison, which we're going to get into by next week, inshallah. It really, really has a big effect on him. Now, his mom had no one to go to. And what happened to her? She went insane. So one of the lessons that we learned early on is that you have to have someone to speak to. Malcom had no one to speak to until he got into prison, and then he found someone. And that's a whole different discussion to have when we get to prison. We're talking about Yusuf alayhi salam, and talking about some other things, about friends I know who went in prison, etc., and their experiences were. But early on, I want to tell you that you're never too young to seek assistance. You don't have to have therapy, but if you need to talk to someone, you need to find who that person is. If you need to talk to someone, you need to find who that person is. It could be an older uncle in the community. It could be a friend. It could be an imam. It could be a therapist. But there has to be someone you can go to. And it doesn't have to be an hour-long session. Look, therapy is not like you're lying on the couch and someone's sitting next to you taking notes. That's not what therapy is. Therapy is a conversation where they sort of help you understand what's going on. And not everyone needs therapy. Some people just need someone to lend an ear. Because sometimes when you're just talking, you're like, oh, I sort of figure it out. Sometimes you just need 5 minutes to get advice. But the mistake that we make is we don't go to people when we need help. And that's something that almost took out Malcom. So Malcom, he's in 7th grade. He's in Mr. Ostrowski's class. Mr. Ostrowski is an English teacher. And English teachers are very pivotal in your lives. I can't think of teachers who are more important than English teachers. I'm an English teacher, that's why I'm saying that. So English teachers, he has an English teacher. He likes this guy a lot. Now, this is the second lesson I want to cover today. Don't ever think you're not important. Now, you might think, oh, here we go again, all this garbage about we're important. No, understand what I'm saying for a moment. I'm not saying you're important for you. I'm saying you're important for other people. Understand what this means. You might say something and might not think it makes a big deal at all, like Mr. Ostrowski did over here. It almost ruined this guy's life. A 2-minute conversation almost caused this person pretty much to end his life prematurely. Because he asked a simple question. What do you want to be when you grow up? Malcom raises his hand and he says, in his own words, I didn't want to be a lawyer. I don't know why I answered I wanted to be a lawyer, but I just said it. And he said, leaning back, Malcom, you're using the N-word that I'm not going to use over here, but you're a good N. Everyone likes you. And you're good with your hands. You're a type, they're not lawyers. Why don't you become a carpenter? And that breaks Malcom. It breaks him so much that he leaves his foster parents. He just starts failing school. He starts misbehaving with his foster parents. The state has to intercede and pull him out. But Mr. Ostrowski, he probably didn't think that it made much of a difference. Look, when you're talking to people, I'm telling you this as a brother. Anas, you got to be quiet, please. Thank you. You have to understand the way you word something and the way you phrase something has an impact. You might be on the court and you might make fun of someone's shot and you might not think it's a big deal. That person might take it to heart because you were probably the most important person to that person, and now all of a sudden someone important fell in their eyes. You might be at the masjid and you're walking out and there's a random person who you just say salam to. That person might have been those individuals who just no one says salam to, because sometimes people are just very quiet, etc. And you see him say salam. And that person remembers it forever. And trust me, I've had that in my life where someone just randomly says salam to me, and it was a down day. And all of a sudden he says salam, like, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, nothing. And that conversation takes you out of your doldrums. And the opposite can occur as well. I remember one time I had a student who was an 8th grader. When I finished, she graduated from 8th grade. She had asked me, can you teach me deen? And I said no, because I hadn't graduated madrasa yet. So I wasn't comfortable teaching deen, like, formally. I didn't know that was a big deal. But that was 2004. In 2007, I found out from her over email that caused her iman to sort of get ruined. And she sort of got, all because I said, no, I can't teach you, because I didn't want to teach you because I felt I wasn't qualified. But when you interact with people, it's very important how you interact with them. It could be a sibling, it could be a parent, it could be a stranger. You can change their life. And so many times we see from the Prophet that happens. Look, the famous story, when he's in Makkah al-Mukarramah, early in prophethood, and there's a woman who's visually impaired. She can't see well. And she's older, so she's not strong. She's standing near the haram. The haram wasn't like it is today with this big mosque and everything. It was just the Kaaba, and there was just sort of these gates around it, not full walls, just gates where you entered through. And then that's it, there were homes. It was just very like, imagine like that circle there, and then you just see stuff around it. That's how it was. The Kaaba was in, just random stuff around there. There's some shops, there's some homes, etc. A woman standing by there, and she's asking, can anyone help me? And everyone's just sort of laughing at her walking by. The Prophet comes by and says, he says, oh my mother, how may I help you? And she said, I want to move, and I have these belongings. It wasn't much, but she couldn't carry it. He said, I'll take it. He's carrying her belongings the entire time until she gets to the awali, like the outskirts. And she says that, this is where I want to stop, I want to settle. So he sort of sets up her home, a small tent, and everything for her. And then he says, oh, my mother, do you need anything else? And she says, no. Now, what's interesting, there's 2 points that are interesting. Point number 1, he kept calling her his mother. It wasn't his mother, but he's just being kind to an older woman, showing her love. Point number 2, the entire time they were walking, they were having a conversation. He was just listening. She was just talking. The conversation was her explaining why she's moving. She was moving because Mecca wasn't the same anymore. Things had gotten really bad. And why did they go bad? Because there was some man named Muhammad who's popped up in the city and now is claiming to be a prophet and is dividing families apart. Who is she speaking to at that point? The Prophet ﷺ, not knowing it's him. And he's just listening. Okay, are you okay? Okay. Hey, why don't you sit down over here? Okay? Good job. And drive your car here. And so he doesn't realize it's her. She doesn't realize it's him. He's listening. He's not taking any offense. And subsequently, what happens? At the end, she says, look, I can't pay you. I don't have much wealth. I don't have anything. But can I at least know your name? So when people come into Mecca, I can tell them, meet this man. He still has good character, so you can learn from him. Now the Prophet is very uncomfortable. Because he doesn't want to expose that that's him, because she's just been bad-mouthing him the whole time, and he hasn't gotten upset. And so finally he just says, my name's Muhammad. Now in history, there were only 4 people named Muhammad before the Prophet ﷺ. 4 or 3? 4. None of them ever claimed to be a prophet, and this is before his time. In his community, he was the only one named Muhammad ﷺ. So when he says, my name's Muhammad, she's like, oh my, she realized her mistake. And she realizes all those things she was saying couldn't be true about this man. She becomes Muslim. One interaction, no apparent da'wah, and he flips her life upside down. So that can happen, or as we see over here, this could happen. Any questions about this before we move forward? Yes, go for it.
Did she say anything bad about him?
Yeah, she was totally bad-mouthing him. She was saying he's come here, he's claiming to be a prophet, he's dividing families apart. Yeah, she wasn't saying oh, he's a scrub and a loser like that. But everything she was saying was true, because families did get divided, but he wasn't dividing them. But still, the way she was saying the tone was very negative. I'm trying to think of an example. Let's say you guys are talking. What was your name again? Yusuf. So you and Yusuf are talking. Okay, you guys are both talking, and you're like, oh man, I was doing laundry, I'll be open. I was doing laundry, and so as a pair of jeans I wasn't wearing, and they're wet, so I just wore a lungi. So some of you guys know I'm wearing a lungi. And you're like, man, I can't believe Saad's wearing a lungi, and the guy's bald. Am I bald? Yes. Am I wearing a lungi? Yes. But if you're saying that, it's sort of it's true, but it's sort of negative. But at the same time, that's what she was saying true things, but she was saying it in a negative way. But when she said it, she realized later, when she figured out this is him and he never once got upset, etc., that all that stuff, the negativity could not be true. There must be more behind it. So now we were able to cover this. Now the first 2 chapters, the first chapter is named Nightmare. The second chapter is named Mascot. Now, the reason why it was named mascot was because, I'm just at that page right now, well, sorry, I think I'd like to be a lawyer. I love Mr. Ostrowski's response. I didn't mention this. Malcolm, one of life's first needs is for us to be realistic. Don't misunderstand me now. We all here like you. You know that. But you got to be realistic about being a N-word. A lawyer, that's no realistic goal for being a N-word. You need to think about something you can be. You're good with your hands, making things. Everyone admires you. Your carpentry shop work. Why don't you plan in carpentry? People like you, as a person, you can get all kinds of work. He thinks he's speaking well. He's complimenting him. You're nice, you work worth it. But what he's basically doing is putting him down. You know what a mascot is? What's a mascot? Who goes to public school over here? What school do you go to? What's your mascot? What is it? A Mustang? Is it? Yeah, okay, cool. You have the Mustangs. Anyone else have a public school they go to? What school do you go to? Okay, what's your mascot? Panther, okay, yeah. So you have these representations. Why do you choose a Mustang? You choose a Mustang because it's a strong animal, it's fast, it's able to carry a lot of load, and it's very valuable. Why do you choose a Panther? Because it's quick, it's strong, it's stealth. These are characteristics you want the athletes to have. No one says, oh, what's your mascot? Oh, we're the MSI obese people. No one would ever do that, right? You know, you see Islamic schools sometimes, like, what's their mascot? It's always like Islamic, like the crescent. My school's mascot's the crescents. But, like, you know, it's like, okay, well, what does that show? Like, it's Islamic, I understand, but you want these characteristics that people, although, why are, like, schools like DePaul and, like, Arizona, like, why are they the devils? Like, you want your kids to be devils? I don't understand that. But, you know, these characteristics you want them to take. He was the token black guy in the school. He was the mascot. That's how he realized people looked at him in the end. And then so afterwards, when this happened, one of the people from the state had come and visited the Swerlins, those who were taking care of him. And she stood up and she said, I guess I've asked you 100 times, Malcolm, do you want to tell me what's wrong? And because with the Lyons family, like, he was going to be removed, I shook her hand and said, nothing, Miss Swerlin. And I felt very bad. I thanked her and went out in front to Mr. Allen, the president of the state, who took me over to the Lions. And he moves out. This whole thing destroyed him. He was having a good time in the foster home that he was being taken care in, and now this one statement destroys him. And his sister could tell. His sister Ella, she lived in Boston. She was older. She lived in Boston, and so somehow she reached out because he would write to her regularly. And so finally she said, "Look, Malcolm, I think you should move in with me." And this is now when he moves from the Midwest to the East Coast. And this makes Malcolm change completely. Malcolm, he says something really interesting over here. He says, whatever I have done since then, I have driven myself to become a success at it. I've often thought that if Mr. Ostrowski had encouraged me to become a lawyer, I would today probably be among the city's professional black bourgeoisie, sipping cocktails and palming myself off as a community spokesman. You want to go home?
No.
What do you want to do?
I'm going to play.
Okay, you go play. Yeah, but don't run. Walk.
Emma said he wants to stay here.
Okay, that's fine, but just quietly, okay? Play over there, okay? Sipping cocktails and palming myself as a community spokesman for the leader in the suffering black masses, while my primary concern would be to grab a few more crumbs from the groaning board of the two-faced whites with whom they're begging to integrate. All praise is due to Allah that I went to Boston when I did. If I hadn't, I'd probably still be a brainwashed black Christian. Two things important here. Number one, he's looking back and saying, this is the best thing that happened to me. He's not saying, why did this guy do this? He's not having a grudge. Khadija and Anas, I think I'm going to have you guys go home. Please sit down nicely and play. Thank you. This went wrong. It destroyed him, but in hindsight, what did he see? It was good for him. There's a verse in Quran where Allah Ta'ala speaks in Surah Baqarah. He says, عَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ تُحِبُّ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. That maybe something happens to you, and you hate that it happens, and it was good for you. And maybe something happens, and it didn't happen. It avoided you. You want it to happen, but it would have been bad if it happened. And Allah knows you don't know. Allah here is bringing up a very important principle that Malcolm will quote over and over. This is like his Islam really coming out. Remember, he's younger than me when he dies. He's 39, I'm 40. He's 39 when he dies. In a short lifespan, and he's only Muslim for a couple years before he dies, he begins, and he's Muslim when he's speaking here, he begins to see Allah's hand in everything. Always recognize the next lesson, that whatever happens, it was best for you, because Allah wouldn't have happened if it wasn't best for you. Give an example. I had to give a talk in someplace in Indiana. I forgot where it was now. Crown Point, Indiana. My cousin, do you guys know Mr. Qadri, Brother Habib from MEC? He was like the really tall, 6'5". He's an educator, he's a principal, he's a superintendent there now. He used to play college basketball. And he actually played D1 basketball. He was actually on the Illinois traveling team when he was in high school. His teammate was Kevin Garnett. Do you guys know who Kevin Garnett is? Or is that too old now? KG was like an all-star. He's a Hall of Famer. He NBA champion. He was one of the better players in recent history. Really, he was in the Wolves, he was in the Celtics, etc. So he's like top tier NBA player. I think he was drafted number 1 or 2 overall. So they were teammates on the Illinois traveling team. The Illinois traveling team only has a select few people. His first year, he's redshirt freshman. When you redshirt, that means you're not going to play that year. You're going to sit out, so you have 1 more year of eligibility. He's playing college ball. He's being scouted from across the country. He plays college ball. He's playing at UIC, but it's still D1, it's Division 1, so he's still NCAA tournament, etc. He goes for a layup in practice. He gets undercut. He falls in his arm. He breaks his arm like 3 or 4 places. Like literally, he said, I left practice holding my arm up because it was so shattered it couldn't stand up by itself. He had to get surgery. When he did surgery, they tried to repair it. That whole summer, he worked hard to get back into shape, and so he gets back. He's on the squad still. Summer league, he's playing ball, breaks his ankle. I think he landed wrong. The second injury was devastating. He could never get back into being like a top tier player. You know, it's funny, the amount of work he's done in the community for education. Any school you attend, any maktab you attend, any Sunday school, chances are he's either directly or indirectly affected it. He's done that much education work for Muslims across the country, across the world actually. That would never have happened had he been a basketball player. He might have made the NBA. And we were always like, he's going to be the first this to make the NBA. He might have made the NBA, 6'5". He has handles, he has a shot, he has an outside game, he has an inside game. He played travel ball, he played with the best around the country, etc. Yeah, he probably would have made it or been close. But what would it have done for him for his akhirah? Or even for the community? The reality is that these things happen because there's some good for it. So anyway, he and I were driving. We had to both give a talk at the same place. It was in Ramadan, I think in 2013. Right before I left for Zambia in 2013. On the way back, I remember very clearly that I missed the exit to get on the highway, and I couldn't figure out how to get on the highway. I was just trying to figure it out, and I couldn't get on. Finally got on the highway, we came back. 5 minutes I had missed the highway. When we were right by my home, there was a horrible accident. And it was fresh. You could see the steam coming, you could see the cops hadn't arrived yet. And he turned to me, he's like, if you didn't miss the exit, we would have been here in time for that accident. Sometimes Allah makes things happen that seems to be a problem, but what happens? He allows us to be saved or something misses us. I have a cousin, she lives in the UK. Her husband's from the UK, she lives in America. They were visiting the UK. This was July 7, 2007. July 7, 2007, I believe. They were going to the tube, the underground subway, to go into the main city of London, and her son delayed them. And they got delayed about 15 minutes. They went to the tube, everything was closed off. What just happened? The 7/7 bombings. They just missed the 7/7 bombings. They would have been there when the bombings occurred. عَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌّ لَكُمْ. You might love something that's bad for you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is how He deals. And so many times you can see Malcolm say, this could have happened. Like when he goes to prison, it's a big example. But Allah saved me. He could have remained in Lansing, but he said, if I was, I would have been either a lawyer. If this never happened, I would have been a lawyer. And what does he say? I'd be a lawyer, not all lawyers like this, a black lawyer at that time who pretends to care for the community, but really is just serving the white interest to get a little more money. That's what he was saying. And I would have been a brainwashed Christian. But Allah had a disaster happen for him that made everything better. So I want you to think to yourselves right now, think to yourselves, what disaster has happened in your life? And think to yourself for one moment, what good came out of it? What's up?
Can you see Anas?
I can see him there, yes.
Is that fine if he's
For now,
okay?
yes, for now, it's fine. Okay? And really think to yourself. I remember my roommate passed away, literally in my arms in college, first semester of college. I was doing CPR on him while he died. I couldn't revive him. You know, you see those shows where they revive him. I couldn't do it. I was trained in CPR. Doing CPR, I couldn't bring him back to life. It was one of the worst moments of my life. It was one of the best things that happened to me. I wish he didn't die. But it was there I started practicing deen. That's what made me start coming onto deen, watching someone die in my arms. And so one of the lessons we learn from this text over and over and over is Allah has a secret plan that He's never going to tell us. But when we see it activated, it's going to change our lives. So to close, the next time something bad happens in our lives, take a step back and think, what's the good Allah has planned over here? It's 1:15. I'm going to stop over here. Now listen, next week we're going to meet, but I have to leave at 1:05 next week. So I'm going to try to get here exactly at 12:35, finish at 12:30, get here 12:35. I have to give a talk somewhere else at 1:15. So I'm going to give the halaqah, leave there at 12:30, get here 12:35, finish by 1:10. I have to give a halaqah somewhere else. So we're going to be 5 minutes shorter next week, okay? Jazakumullah khairan. It's time for adhan. Please don't leave. I'm going to take the kids home and switch them for the older kids to come for prayer. Wa akhiru da'wana. Khadija, Hamna, Anas, let's go. We're going to go home. Get Zayd and Uthman. Before adhan, just a quick reminder once more, we have the Youth Qiyam next week, Saturday the 1st of May. Begins at midnight, goes till Fajr. Understand it's a great opportunity to have Q&A and talk to address different issues that plague us. And on top of that, there'll obviously be prayer and worship. There'll be food and just different activities, table tennis. Is there kabri over here? No, I'm just checking. No, just joking about that.